Here. Hello party people and welcome to office hours. Little odd start there with all kinds of technology things going on. So we got a few regular listeners here in the crowd. Let's see here. We have the Kazakh is here. We got SQL Dev DBA. SQL Dev DBA says he's lurking because they have hurricane cleanup here in Orlando. Richie's doing that as well. Richie Rump, my developer out of South Florida, recently moved from Miami to Orlando just in time for that hurricane to come through. Richie's fine, his family's fine, their house is okay. So hugs out to everybody who had to deal with that. Chetan is here, good to see you. Morse is here as well. Howdy folks. So let's see here, we'll hop to it. We'll get to some of the top voted questions. So the top voted question is from Mohit, who asks, hi Brent, what options does a database administrator have in terms of performance tuning when I'm managing third-party applications with lots of crappy queries and hints? So when I'm talking with clients about tuning, I like to say that there are three dials that I can turn. There's the table and index design dial, there's the query design dial, and there's the hardware dial. Hardware also includes licensing. And I said, now, those are the only three dials that I have. If you know about another dial, I'd love to hear about it. But generally speaking, and there are a few things like server level options that you can set. But even when people say, well, I want to turn on RCSI, isn't that a magic bullet? Well, you also have to test your queries and you may have to change your queries. So that's the only three dials, table and indexes, query design, and hardware. So if you tell me you can't change the tables or index design, and I can't change the query design, there's only one dial left. So there you go. That's what your options are. Next up, we have MyTeaGotCold, who asks, page fullness is very important, and I'm going to stop you right there. When you start your question with a fact, that immediately makes me question it. Why? What makes you say that? What makes you say that page fullness is a problem on your database server that you need to solve? What happens over and over again is someone will go to a training class, they'll hear about a topic and they'll go, I bet I have that problem. It's just like, you know how when we search for diseases on WebMD, when we like go look and see, oh, I think I got cancer. Oh, doesn't matter what your symptoms are. End result WebMD, I think I got cancer. If you just listen to whatever the internet tells you or whatever some random book tells you, then you're going to think that all of your computers have exactly the same problem. Instead, step backwards and say, how do I know that page fullness is the problem on my SQL Server that I need to focus on solving? He continues by asking, but SP Blitz Index never touches page fullness. Correct. It's an index design tool, not a maintenance tool. He also says Ola touches it only in limited mode. What am I missing? What you're missing is the documentation. Go read the documentation on that DMV you're trying to access and see the horrible downsides of trying to get page fullness. You actually have to read the data pages in order to get it. And it's slow, it's time intensive, so it's something that's best done by a professional like you manually when you know page fullness is your problem. But the rest of the time, don't go trying to solve a problem that you may not have by doing something that's really horrible and invasive on your SQL server. Let's see. SQL Dev DBA says your oxen has died of dysentery. Hey, DBA Duck, good to see you, Ben. Next up, we have Tony, who asks, there's lots of talk about linked servers and how we shouldn't do that. It says, on one of your recent posts, you mentioned to move the data to the same server, and I want to just confirm that cross-server queries are bad, but cross-database queries on the same server are acceptable. Correct. You have that correct. There's nothing wrong with cross-database queries on the same server. There's everything wrong with linked server queries. Next up, we have Trudging Through a Swamp says, I swear I watched a video of you demonstrating how NOLOCK could return incorrect data. I've looked everywhere and cannot find that video. I did find a blog post about you, but I'd like to see the video again. Is it still available? Yes, go to your friendly neighborhood search engine. Part of the problem might be that you're using Bing. Did I say that out loud? I think I might have said that out loud. Use Google. Search for Brent NOLOCK video. There are like half a dozen. I've done it so many times. It's all over the first page of Google search results. It's all over the video search results. Google, not Bing. Crazy asks, who's the Itzik Ben-Gan of Postgres? I have no idea. I'm sorry, I just couldn't tell you there. You're, no clue. Maybe somebody in the video comments will be able to answer that. Next up, Paul asks, how do you properly set up index maintenance with Ola Hallengren on an availability group? So it has been so long since I've done that, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. If I remember right, you just set up Ola's maintenance, index maintenance, and you set it to work on user databases. There's a parameter for databases, and you choose user databases, and it'll automatically skip databases that it can't touch, like secondaries and read-only databases and offline databases. Now, can I swear by that? No, because it's been, like I said, years since I've actually done that. But otherwise, actually go and just do that, set it up for user databases, and then if you hit a specific error, go check in with Ola's support area to see where, with the exact error message that you're getting. Next up, and DBA Duck chimes in that is correct too as well. Mailbox says, what are your advantages and disadvantages of housing your data lake in SQL Server? Well, SQL Server costs $2,000 a core for standard edition, and data lakes are large enough that they usually need enterprise, so you're talking $7,000 a CPU core. Have you got $7,000 per CPU core? Have you ever had to pay for Microsoft licensing yourself? Go to your boss and say, hey, here's the deal. I want to run our data lake on this big of a SQL server. It's going to cost $250,000, $500,000, whatever. Can I do that? And your boss is probably going to say, sure, and I'm going to lay you off in order to pay for that licensing. Does that sound like a deal? And then you're going to go, wait. Let me find a free option. And then you're going to go do what the rest of the world does, which is you host data lakes on open source software or else cloud-based services that just charge you for usage. There you go. Next up, Juan Pablo asks, is it correct that performance is greatly impacted by cluster size of a partition, i.e. 8K cluster size is ideal? No, that is not true. That has not been true for years. And feel free to run your own tests if you believe that it is a big issue for your particular storage. There may be storage out there where it does matter, but I haven't seen storage where it makes any kind of significant performance difference. And I'm going to define significant as like 10% or more. Let's say, just to say, that it made a 3% difference in your storage throughput. It's like the last resort to go through and change existing servers. The only thing you would want to do is set up brand new servers with a specific one. And the sector size is really, and the sector size performance differences are really going to be impacted by your specific storage gear. It really is different with every storage gear. Next up, MuSQL says, hi Brent, I was recently involved in a debate on LinkedIn with a .NET developer. What kind of hobbies do you have that you're arguing on LinkedIn with other? Who claims that stored procedures are legacy and that new projects never use them. What is your opinion on this? That developer probably isn't using stored procedures. You know, there's an old saying about asking blind men to define an elephant. There's like one blind man is holding onto the elephant's leg. And he says, well, elephants are kind of like a tree trunk. And then there's another blind man who's holding onto the elephant's tail. And he's like, no, elephants are like a little palm tree. They wave back and forth in the wind. People's definition of what's legacy and what's current is often affected by their visibility out at the real world. Why would you debate with some stranger about what is current and what's legacy? Because they're just looking at it through their own small lens. Next up, Dopinder asks, does SQL or row page compression make up for the low drive performance in Azure? Has it ever gotten you across the finish line? For me personally, no, because Azure storage for the most part is kind of like a USB thumb drive. Compression isn't going to be enough to get you across the finish line there. That's not to say it won't help. Again, like I've talked about with some of the answers, that it might give you a 5 or 10% storage performance increase, but usually you need something more dramatic than that. I'm not saying I've ever had to have somebody rip it out. If it gets you across the finish line, by all means, that's totally fine. But it hasn't ever been the thing where I've said, all right, all we have to do is turn on compression and we can continue to use this old potato notebook for our storage. No, it just doesn't really work that way. Next up, we have Scenario from Real World who asks, how can I have coworkers stop using Activity Monitor? I cannot see that Activity Monitor is getting any better. No, it isn't getting any better. Your best way when you want to convince your coworkers to take a new approach is to show them the benefits of the new approach. Do a lunch and learn on your preferred replacement for Activity Monitor, or during a problem, show them, say, hey, here, check this out. Right now we're having a performance issue. I'm going to show you how easy it is to use SP Blitz First or SP Who is Active or whatever your favorite tool is. Show them how easy it is to get across the finish line. Then if they continue to use Activity Monitor, I'm kind of okay with that because they've just decided that they've seen the benefits, or you haven't done a good enough job of selling the benefits. They've seen the benefits and they choose to do it their old way. There are a lot of people out there who still do really stupid stuff, and we can't stop all of them. I should probably learn that lesson myself. Let's see, next up we have OracleIsDiffrent who asks, after downgrading SQL Server from Enterprise to Standard Edition, we're noticing performance issues. Their question continues, but I'm not going to read it because it seems pretty obvious.
Oh, hey, Brent, I went from a performance sports car to an econo box. It's going slower. Can you tell me why?
Really? 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 Next question. Yavu says, hi Brent, I've been a DBA for over a year now, and I've noticed that a lot of DBAs don't write too many queries. How do you get good at writing long stored procedures in T-SQL while being on the administration side? Well, Yavu, I think part of it is you're misunderstanding what the job duty is. If you're a database administrator, you administer. If you're a database developer, then you develop. Go figure how that works. Now, if you would like to make a change, if you want to shift things around and you want to shift from being a database administrator to being a database developer, then you have to do that other job. And because people aren't coming to database administrators and saying, hey, I know we got developers over there, but can you do some development for me? Most of the time that's not happening. It does happen in shops where you have a database administrator who's really good at writing queries already, but otherwise they're not bringing queries or requirements to people who aren't good at that job. That just wouldn't make logical sense. So if you want to learn database development, pick up a book by Itzik, Ben-Gan. They are phenomenal. Itzik, Ben-Gan, search Amazon or your favorite bookseller. That you can get an old one. Like you get the old versions, they're like $5. They're 10, 12, 15 years old. It doesn't matter. Even the old versions are phenomenal. It's going to be like if you buy a used version for 10 bucks, it's going to be the best $10 that you ever spent on your career. He's really good at teaching how to write queries, stored procedures, triggers, functions, all of that kind of thing. And then we'll do one more. Bruno asks, what do you think of transactional replication? Would it be better to use log shipping instead? I kind of think of the features of SQL Server as like different tools that are laid out in front of me. Like I'm a carpenter and I have different tools in front of me. I have a saw, I have a hammer, a screwdriver, an awl, a lathe, and that's about all the carpenter tools I know. T-square, maybe, belt sander, kind of stretching here. So I have all these different tools laid out in front of me. No one tool is bad. It's just a matter of picking the right tool for the right use case. Now, NanoDBA says use transactional replication if you hate yourself. I will say that replication is one of those tools that's very hard to use, that it breaks a lot, and that it has a lot of gotchas and edge cases. However, if it works for you, that's great. Now, defining the points, oh, Renegade Larson just gave out like a half a dozen gift certificate or gift subscriptions. Thank you, Renegade, that's awesome. Any of you who got a subscription from Renegade, feel free to leave a thank you. Be polite, leave a thank you over there in chat. When would I reach for transactional replication? When would I reach for that tool? The times when I would reach for it is when, and I'm going to just give a couple of examples. There are lots of good examples. I'm just going to give a couple. If, let's say that you needed to keep your primary SQL Server lean and mean with a very limited amount of history, but you needed to keep all history over on a secondary server. One way, not necessarily the best way, but one way that you could do that is to set up replication between the two and just not replicate deletes. So every insert and update gets flown down to the transactional subscriber, but the deletes do not. Another way that you may need to use bidirectional transactional replication would be if you had two active sites that both needed to stay up and running, even when the network connection got severed between the two. So you needed two active servers. Availability groups doesn't do that. Log shipping doesn't do that. Only transactional replication does that kind of thing. Am I saying that that's any fun? No, it's horrible. I haven't worked in replication easily 10, probably 13 or 14 years. And I'm not saying it's a bad feature. I just don't enjoy it, and I would drink even more than I drink today. I know it seems hard to believe. As a side note, so I got onto compounded semaglutides, which is like Ozempic or Wegovy. I got onto those, and I'm amazed at how they just shut off your desire for alcohol. Like I used to drink probably 3 to 4 nights a week. Not a lot, but just like sometimes a lot. Sometimes a whole lot. But like usually 3 or 4 nights a week, I would have either 1 or 2 glasses of wine or 1 or 2 gin and tonics, fairly large. I mean, I made my hand gesture like this, but obviously they weren't that big. Gin and tonics. And I'm amazed at how much it just shuts off your desire for alcohol. Like now it's maybe 2 nights a week, maybe if that. Now I still go out and party. Friends of ours just took us to West Hollywood, to the gay bars out in West Hollywood, and that was bananas. So we got absolutely hammered, and it was tons of fun. Anyway, how did I go? Replication. Replication would make me drink way more if I had to deal with that, and I've certainly not wanted to mess with that in a while. I respect that it's a cool feature and it does cool stuff. It's just not my bag. Let's see. That does it. We've been going for a little while there. I'll stop there. Oh, I have to actually have a call that I have to join in about 20 minutes, so I got to go set up for that, interviewing a DBA candidate for a client. So it's always fun interviewing DBA candidates for clients because one of two things happens. Either they start the call and they didn't know it was going to be me joining ahead of time, and then I join and it completely throws them off their game. They're like, or they know that it's coming and they're already geeked out and kind of excited. But either way, I get that it's a flustered thing. Like, oh, they've seen me on YouTube or whatever. Now they finally get to talk to me, and people think that I'm going to be a hard interview. Oh, DK Kimbo says, nice haircut. Thanks. I just got a cut yesterday. My favorite salon person. People think that I'm going to be a hard interviewer. Yeah, I am not. I am a really easy, relaxed interviewer. I don't want to play Trivial Pursuit. And for those of you who've been through my DBA job interview Q&A class, you'll know why. It's very chill, very laid back. Hi, Sean. Code with Sean. I'm very much about just tell me about your experience. Tell me a few of your favorite things about databases. I want to hear what's coming from you, like the parts that you're familiar with, what you're excited about, and then I'll ask you questions about those. And then I'll, of course, ask scenario-based questions based on what the client is facing. Have you ever solved this problem before? Have you ever solved this problem before? And so forth. But yeah, no, I'm a pretty fun, I like to think fun, enjoyable interview. DK Kimbo says, please tell me the KB numbers of the last 4 CUs. I know, right? Like there are those Trivial Pursuit interviews, because I've been on the other side of it, where people are like, tell me the formula for maxdop for SQL Server 2017. Assume that you have 2 NUMA nodes. And I'm like, oh, for crying out loud, that's what the documentation is for. You just open the documentation and go read it. DK Kimbo says I had an interview question like that. And my response, because I've had to go through interviews like that, now it's been more than a decade since I've had to do it, but my response to those kinds of things were, is that important to you? Is that something that I need to know as part of the daily basis? Because if your job is to find someone who knows CU numbers by heart, I want to hear a little bit more about the job, because that doesn't sound like the job that I applied to. The job I applied to was for managing databases, doing this, this, and this. It wasn't about memorizing. So tell me why about I would have to know those by heart, and then that seems to help a little. It's also a terrible, Renegade says I would fail in a heartbeat. I know I would too. There's only one CU number I know by heart for SQL Server, 280.65.35. That's maxdop. 280.65.35. And the only reason I know that is because I've been teaching classes for years, and people will go, and I always have to point to the maxdop article. I'm like, here's what Microsoft says, here's why it's not quite correct, but it's close, and here's what we do about it. So thanks for hanging out with me today, and I will see y'all on the next office hours. Adios.